Welcome to our third session, third session already of this UDL Symposium online. Please note that closed captions are available for this session and can be enabled by selecting the CC button. And if you have any questions, please put those into the chat and we'll ask the presenters at the end. Now, this session is how anyone can make an engaging podcast in an hour. So I'm very excited to hear about this. And presenting the session for us today is Mark Shelton, Sophia Holmes, and Dr. Brigid Morrison from the University of Tasmania. Now, this workshop will go for about 55 minutes. We do have some very tight time, so we could do a whole day, but 55 minutes is all we've got. So to start us off, over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for having us, and thank you for all those in attendance. We're really excited about it as well. This is a session that we've run a few times between the three of us, but we've made some sort of technical changes to hopefully make it as interactive as possible today. We want you to be all engaged and to get a bit of experience in making podcasts yourselves. One thing that I will add right at the start is that we do have a link that we can include at the end that will provide you with an overview of everything that we've covered today. So please don't feel as though you've got to frantically take notes or write down links or save anything like that. We have got a link to a document that'll help you to make your own podcast in the future. So just relax and sort of get involved in the process. So just some brief introductions from us. My name's Mark Shelton. Lecturer at the University of Tasmania, as Elizabeth mentioned, in applied technologies. And we, as a collective group, have been making podcasts for a little while now. We sort of co-taught a unit. So this is all based on our experiences and trying to identify some of the barriers and to proactively help you work your way through some of those barriers so you can make your own podcasts in your practice. So I'll throw to Sophia now for a brief introduction from her.
Hi, I'm Sophia Holmes, and I think Mark really summed it up. Mark and I teach alongside with Brigid, and we've had such great success and such enjoyment in collaborating with each other to create podcasts. Over to you, Bridge.
Yep, and I'm Brigid, and I think important to note that when we really started to do this work in earnest, it was at the beginning of COVID, and our numbers went from having 30 students in a class to 250 students in a class, and we were looking for ways to be able to engage in a fully online environment.
So the problem that we were faced with, as Brigid sort of just set up there, was access to that fully online environment. So a lot of our students, and we'll go through some of the statistics from University College. So we work at a part of UTAS that focuses on pathway programs. So we deliver predominantly diploma level and associate degree level qualifications. And a lot of our students are what would be sometimes considered non-traditional. So some statistics about our cohort: 56% are mature aged, 44% first in family, 70% are from either low or medium socio-economic backgrounds, 45% or more are in one or more diversity groups, and 81%, and in our little part of the world, that's actually 100% of our students study by distance online. So as you can see there, 45 in one or more diversity groups. UDL is central to everything we do, and if it's not, we're desperately trying to make it that way. It's one of those things that, it's all about continuous improvement and bouncing ideas off each other. But for our cohort, we wanted to make sure that they could access information and content in an engaging manner. And I think probably the other thing that the research told us when we started to head down this path was it wasn't just about students that had identified as having some sort of disability or another. Certainly from my experience, when I started working with UDL, you would often consider students that might be dyslexic or dyslexic or have other learning difficulties. But the thing that we learned was that access and equity was also about our students that couldn't necessarily make it to our tutorials. So to be perfectly honest, the impetus for the podcasting was that we just didn't have students showing up live during our tutorials that we were hosting once a week. And that wasn't necessarily because they weren't engaged or that they weren't interested, or, you know, it was purely that they had a heap of other stuff going on in their lives. And when you think about a cohort with a heap of mature age learners, of course, they're going to be juggling a range of different things. So some other statistics, and for some of you who aren't from Tasmania in the audience, and I'm sure there's plenty of you, only 52.8% of Tasmanian men, 46.9% of Tasmanian women read at a functional level. So that's a huge amount of our population. And if you look at places like the Northwest, where I'm from, those numbers are even more significant. So in the world of the University Accord, where the objective is for us to eventually be able to reach 80% of Tasmanians, we need to make sure that everything that we do in relation to, especially in our pathway programs, supports different learning preferences and needs. Our students are now working in jobs more than ever. Some of the statistics there, 86% are working while they're studying. For us, the average hours that our university college students are working a week is 27. And a lot of them are doing at least a part-time, if not full-time university load on top of that. So these are a lot of the challenges that we're facing and some of the reasons that they weren't attending our online sessions. And the number one cause of stress for those students is being able to balance that study with external responsibilities. So that's where we were, and we sort of put our heads together, had a bit of a look at what the research was telling us, but essentially we had to think differently. We had to approach this differently, because the other thing that we learned was that our tutorials, while they were good when people were there live, weren't necessarily as engaging or interesting when people were watching the recordings later on. So we're not suggesting podcasting is a full solution. In no way, shape or form. I think if we think about some of the principles that underpin UDL, it's about taking a multitude of approaches to cater for as many needs proactively as we can, as opposed to reactively. But podcasting was something that jumped out at us. I think that's predominantly because it's, you know, it's something that we do in our own time as much as anything. But it seemed like a really good flexible solution to a lot of those problems. 78% of Australians are listening to online audio monthly, whether that be audiobooks or podcasts. So that's a huge percentage of Australians that are already doing that off their own bat. 40% are listening to a podcast at least once a month, which is, again, huge numbers. And that puts us, I think, don't quote me on this, I think Sweden's just overtaken us. But I think we are the second most avid podcasting listening nation on the planet, behind the Swedes. And weekly podcast listeners spend on average 7 hours a week tuning in. So people that do listen to podcasts do it a lot. I'd hate to see the statistics on my Spotify about how many podcasts I listen to a week. It'd be pretty significant. But it was all about the accessibility and portable nature. That's what we wanted to tap into, because lives are busy, especially if you're talking about people that have caring responsibilities, employment responsibilities, or a range of a combination of these things. So I might just throw to Sophia just to put her under the pump here a bit. But here's some of the points that we thought were very specific to UDL as to why podcasting could play, sort of part of the solution.
Yeah, so we really looked at how podcasting and how audio-centered content really can cater for a more diverse range of students, including people with dyslexic needs. The ability to really easily develop those audio transcripts for our podcasts, as well as people who, again, that non-traditional learner whose first language isn't English, who found podcasts more enjoyable, more useful, and were able to really listen to them more than once. which people tend not to really want to reread content, but they're very happy to listen to it when they're driving and then back at home doing the washing up. So we certainly found that there was a different way that students were engaging with the podcasts. What's the next slide? I'll go back to you, Mark.
Yeah, fantastic. And this is some student feedback that we actually received. We didn't seek this out. This actually came from a conversation that one of our peers was having with her group of students who are also in our course. But so they're the same group of students, but completing another unit. And she asked them, you know, what they liked about studying at university college. They were just doing an online session. And the topic of our podcast in our unit came up. So we thought it was really valuable insight because we weren't involved in the conversation. We weren't there. So the students, you know, could speak freely about what they did and didn't like about the podcast. And it wasn't sort of solicited. So we just wanted to sort of share, this is, you know, what they were genuinely thinking at the time. And as you can see, you know, it is all about creating that accessibility. And I just saw a little note in the chat about people not being able to attend. Gillian attending the session online because she couldn't attend the symposium in person. I think that's the key point, isn't it? You know, like we want people to receive all of this information, and if you can do it, as Sophia just mentioned, while you're, you know, on your commute or in the backyard or whatever the case might be, you're far more inclined to stay up to date. You're far more inclined to be able to engage in the content. So that's just some of the feedback that we received, and to be honest, we were quite blown away. So our attendance rates in the online tutorials was less than 30%. We had in excess of 80% of the students listening to the podcasts, and it wasn't compulsory. So, you know, they were sort of voting with their feet or with their ears, I suppose, is what they were up to. But they engaged in a way that we certainly couldn't have imagined at the start. So we'd just like to throw over to you for a moment and to get your thoughts in the chat, because we're about to move into the interactive component of the session. But just to give us an idea, in the chat, if you could just quickly pop in what might stop you from making a podcast. Let's say that we did a good job of convincing you that it was an awesome thing to do today. What are some of the challenges as an educator that would stop you from going back to your workplace next week and putting together a podcast for your students? Because we have found along the way a lot of sort of similar themes pop up. So it'd be great to see some of the things that you might be a bit worried about. Lack of a radio voice. Resourcing, absolutely. Having to edit, most definitely. Time and skills, wonderful. Familiarity, time constraints, quality. I think it's fair to say that this is looking pretty familiar, which is good, because we have hopefully in the session that we're about to sort of deliver to you, and Sophia's just adding a few of those chats up on the screen now, setting up a quiet space. I mean, that's a hard one, Vanessa, isn't it? That's certainly a challenge.
These are all things that we were predicting, Mark,
yes.
and we have experienced ourselves, and yeah, they're all exactly in line with what we thought.
Absolutely. So just to address a couple of those points off the top before I sort of show you in action, the vast majority of the tools I'm going to show you today don't cost anything. There is one tool that does have a cost associated, and I'll point that out when we get involved in that. So that's one that I sort of wanted to put out there. The other thing that I'll be intentionally doing, I have a fancy microphone here at my desk, but I'll be intentionally just using the microphone in my headphones to show you that you don't necessarily have to have, spend a huge amount of money on equipment either. So that's something else that we'll do. But a lot of the time and resources, I'll be quite honest, as of last week, up until about Tuesday last week, this presentation and the interactive part that we're about to jump into was going to be hosted on a completely different platform. And we've done this presentation a few times to different groups, and that platform, I would suggest, is probably, which is quite simple, is probably about 10 times more complicated than what we're about to show you. We've come across a tool that absolutely has changed the game in relation to podcasting. I geek out on this stuff, and I was very excited when I showed these guys the other day about this tool, because I think it does a fantastic job of taking some of the fear out of it. Change the game forever. Absolutely, Vanessa. Yeah. Okay, so I will hopefully address a lot of those points as we progress. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to make sure I haven't skipped a slide here. We're going to make one from scratch in half an hour. Now that used to be a real flex when we first sort of delivered this, but actually we're going to be able to do it much quicker than that. We're going to be able to do it in about half an hour with me waffling on about everything that we're doing. So it's quite a straightforward process. So I'm just going to stop sharing this part of my screen for a moment. And what I'm going to do, firstly, is I'm going to put, and you can follow along at home if you would like to. So in the chat, I'm going to just put a link, and I'll see if I can pin that. No, so you'll see right at the bottom there, 11:01 a.m. There's a link to an online editing tool called Adobe Podcast. So I'm sure a lot of you will be pretty familiar with Adobe, and I'll share my screen and I'll remember to include sound, and I'll jump over to there. So this is, as it stands today, free to use. It is in beta mode, which means that there are some glitches. The other thing that I will point out is that I am currently on this Zoom from the northwest of Tasmania, which is notorious for not fantastic internet. It is the nicest part of Tasmania, though, for those of you who are thinking about coming to have a visit. Never mind about the south and the north, where the other two are from. The northwest is spectacular. But the reason that I bring this up is that if the bandwidth and the internet where I am can cope with this, while I'm also on a Zoom, that suggests that, you know, most half decent internet is going to be able to cope with doing this recording. Okay, so you'll see that it is a bit slow at times, but really, all things considered, I'm in sort of, you know, not a great position to be able to do things in an online environment in my garage in the northwest of Tasmania. But here we go. So you'll have to sign in. It is free at the moment. You can upgrade. Look, to be honest, the tools for Adobe Podcast, it's just not worth it at this point. Will it always be free? I'm not too sure. If some of the other tools from Adobe Express that they've released in the past few years are anything to go by, there will always be a free version, and you'll start to have to pay for certain elements of it at some point. But for the most part, it should stay relatively free, I would suggest, for quite a while yet. So I'm just trying to get I've got about 4 screens open now, trying to see what I'm doing here. Okay, so there are 3 main tools in the Adobe Podcast Suite: the Enhanced Speech, the Mic Check, and the Studio. We're going to focus on the Studio today, but we're going to incorporate via the Studio one of the tools called Enhanced Speech. Now, I'm not necessarily keeping track of the chat, by the way, but if anyone has any technical questions, please pop them in the chat and I'll get to those at some point. But as I mentioned right at the start, we'll absolutely be sharing a document that will show you how this works. So don't panic if you know, I go over anything too quickly. So we're going to go into the Studio, and hopefully me waffling on there for the last 2 minutes has given a few of you a chance to sign up for Adobe Podcast. That was the intent of dragging that out a little bit. Oh, I'm in the Studio. There we go. I've already selected that. So I'm going to start a new project. You'll see that you've got multiple projects here that you can come back and edit later on. You'll also see that there are templates that you can use for your audio. So that's a really good way to learn a few tips and tricks as well. And then there's links to the other tools. If you wanted to actually start a podcast and share it on Spotify or Apple Podcast or whatever, it even links out to Adobe's little graphics template, so you can create a really cool little graphic. But I'm not going to speak about AI generated graphics with Sophia in the room, who works in that industry. I'm going to keep that just sort of off the table for today. We're going to use AI for a really powerful reason today, a really beneficial reason today. So we're going to click on New Project, and it'll bring up a canvas, which is really simple, really straightforward, and we'll be able to jump straight in. Rather than me sort of tell you about these, we're just going to use them as we go. So the first thing that I want to do, and I've got a few options here to get voices into the podcast, is to start recording. So I'm just going to record by hitting the little record button in the corner. It's all pretty intuitive. Start recording. You'll see that I pause for about a second until the timer starts going. These are the things that you sort of pick up as you go along, but I'll do my little intro now. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we're at the UDL Symposium, and we're going to give you a rundown of, and I'm intentionally saying here a bit, I'm going to give you a rundown of all of the wonderful things that Adobe Podcasts can do. Now, I started a bit there for good reason, because I'll show you how I can take that out of my recording, because for someone that does you know, a fair bit of this stuff, there's always stuff that you want to take out. Just in general terms though, I would never recommend over editing a podcast for students. You want it to sound natural. I think that's a really important component. So another element of UDL, of course, when we talk about all things podcasting, is the importance of transcriptions. And you'll see on the screen that while I've been talking there for the last 15 seconds, it has transcribed everything that I just said. So if I play that back. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we're at the UDL Symposium, and we're going to give you a rundown of, and I'm intentionally saying here a bit, I'm going to give you a rundown of all of the wonderful things that Adobe Podcasts can do. Okay, so this is all this stuff in the middle I want to take out, because I didn't want to sort of do that sort of bit in the middle. So what I can do is just get my cursor, and I'm going to take out here, from here, and I'm going to drag this down, just using left click and dragging down. I'm going to hit delete. And I've just deleted that from the transcript, but you'll notice if I hit play. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we're at the UDL Symposium, and I'm going to give you a rundown of all of the wonderful things that Adobe Podcasts can do. And that's close. It's still a bit wonky, isn't it? So if I click that dot where there was a bit of a pause, and I hit delete, and I'm doing this as I go, and I go back to the start. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we're at the UDL Symposium, and I'm going to give you a rundown of all of the wonderful things that Adobe Podcasts can do. Right, so that's a really simple way to edit. You notice the volume go up and down a bit though, from one chop to another. If I had to re-record it, I can re-record it, right? I can just delete that by coming over here to the bin. Hopefully you can see what's going on. But it was an easy way for me to take out the guff in the middle, and I've got my transcription. Now, annoyingly, that transcribed everything perfectly. But I can, if my transcription was wrong, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So my name is Mark Shelton, and I am coming to you live from Wynyard in northwest Tasmania. Now, I know for a fact that that's going to get Wynyard wrong. There's no way that it's going to pick up on Wynyard. That's just one of those words that it always does. So in my transcriptions, when that happens, while it's transcribing, give myself a couple of seconds.
Mark, there's a request for a Scottish accent next.
A Scottish accent? Leave it with me. Yep. I'm coming to you live. Oh, it's got Wynyard right. Okay. I can't believe that it did that. All right. If Wynyard was incorrect, which that's pretty good that it's picking up on that, I can come over here to correct transcript, and instead perhaps I was meant to say Bernie, and you'll see that it changes it. Oh, changes it in the transcript. Maybe it's going to tell me that the transcript's correct. If I hit enter, that's a bit glitchy. Okay, that should be doing that. I'll come back to that. I'm not sure why it's doing it. So that should be changing. I don't know why it's not changing, but the correct transcript, this is always good when you're live, isn't it? No, it's not doing it today, but you can correct the transcript. I think if I hit If I hit refresh, it would probably do it, but I'm a bit worried about doing that. Let me come back to that in a minute. But I've just recorded 2 bits of audio there, right? Now, the other thing that you'll notice, because I'm recording on my headphones, if you have a listen to this. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, it's a bit tinny. Doesn't sound great, right? That's not perfect. That's not what we want to hear. So one of the really powerful things that Adobe Podcast can do from an AI perspective is add this filter. So if I add a filter to this, you'll see that I can enhance the speech. And you'll see now that the speech is enhanced for this whole section. Now you have a listen to the difference. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we're at the UDL Symposium and I'm going to give you a rundown of all of the wonderful things that Adobe. So it makes it sound so much cleaner, makes it sound like I'm in a far more professional recording studio. So even if I don't have the equipment, even if I'm not in a perfectly quiet room, you can do this in a way that, you know, was otherwise unthinkable till very, very recently. So that's the filter button, which is a really powerful thing to do. The other thing that I might like to do, because I want to make my podcast sound as professional as possible to my students, is incorporate some music. So Adobe Podcast, if I come over here to the left, has collections of royalty-free music. I don't have to worry about putting commercial music in a podcast. Everything here I can use for an Adobe podcast. It's royalty free. It's sort of got these different genres that I can choose from. So I might go with lo-fi, and I might want an intro that is low energy. I can have a listen to that to get an example. So if I'm happy with that, I just hit plus, and you'll see that it adds a lo-fi intro into my podcast there, right? So now if I hit play at the start, and it works sort of chronologically from top to bottom here, which will start to become more relevant. It'll play my intro music as I go. I could have gone with a short intro. That probably would have been smart for demonstration purposes. The other thing that I can do though, hello and welcome to the podcast, is I can come up to here on the music and I can fade that out. So what that will do is get my, and I'll just play from here this time. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we're at the UDL Symposium. Those two things together. I can also, if I was so inclined, set it as the background if I wanted to have background music. So now when I play it. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we're at the UDL Symposium and I'm going to give you a rundown of all of the wonderful things. Background music or a bedding track. I can assure you that having to do that, we would have spent 15 minutes me showing you how to record, how to edit that in one of the other bits of software that we used to use. That is so much simpler, it's not even funny. The other thing that I can do, because I'm going to bring Sophia into the mix in a minute, is I can put a little, now which I choose lo-fi, I can put a transition that goes from one section for the podcast to the other. You'll see I've just selected that I want it here, and I want that low energy transition.
Mark, while you're adding that,
yes.
Carla had a great question about background music and distracting, and we've certainly talked about that, and it's something that we kind of ended up on thinking that there's more research that needs to be done, and that whether you offer two versions and you know that you have one with the music, which is for 80% of your audience, and then you have one without. Yep. But yeah, as Bridge pointed out, it can be a really good signposting, giving students a moment to pause, but definitely being conscious and selecting. I think when Mark and I were listening to someone playing around testing the other day, we found some pretty funky stuff that we loved, but was definitely not appropriate.
Yeah, steer clear of the lemon base one. Yeah, it's not great. So and I think signposting from a UDL perspective is probably the important one, and that's where these transitions come in. Now, the other thing that I might like to do is add a placeholder, and I can drag, if I can put that in the right spot. So if I come to the end here and then put in a placeholder or put it at the bottom, I can split that in two if I wanted to, and I can move these around. I can make them put them wherever I want to, which is kind of useful. But the other thing that I can do is just get rid of them altogether. So if I click out here and go to placeholder, and that's where I might say something like, I want to get Sophia's thoughts here. And that tells me that's where I want to put something for later on. That's just a little prompter for me. So to make this more collaborative, there's a couple of ways that I can do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is to invite Sophia through the podcasting software application. Now, there's a bit of technical difficulty here. Hopefully we get this right. The difficulty isn't with the software itself. The difficulty is that I'm about to invite Sophia through this program while we're both on the same Zoom. So hopefully we're not going to have any audio trouble. But in most cases, this is actually quite simple. So if I go to invite guests, so let's say I wanted to bring in some industry expert advice, or I wanted to bring in my students, I put their email in there. They'll get a little prompter in their email box pretty soon thereafter. So I can send an invite, and you'll notice in a minute, once Sophia's clicked on it, at the moment, this is me, I'm connected. I'll get a little icon saying Sophia's here. So the other thing that I'll just add while Sophia's doing that is we found that conversational was a really good approach to podcasting. One person talking has merit if you just want to get across, short, sharp, quick burst facts to help people sort of retain information. But if for engagement, conversations were always a much better approach. So incorporating conversations with either industry experts or people in the field is always a really fantastic thing to do. And Sophia's just logging in now, and I'm just padding for time a little bit, but we'll see how we go. There she comes. So that was pretty simple. So now I've got Sophia Holmes. All right, so she's now connected as well. So if I go to record, you'll see that there are now 2 people involved in the recording. Sophia, can you give me a brief rundown of your favourite podcast that you're listening to at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. My favorite podcast is Swag Family World Rides. It's by my sister and brother-in-law and their 3 kids. They're currently riding around the world on a tandem and a triplet, and they are recording a podcast in a tent. Insane.
Unbelievable. So then I hit stop recording. That does sound like a good podcast, actually, Sophia. I do want to listen to that. But if you can record one in a tent in was it Peru? Then you can pretty much record a podcast from anywhere. And it's automatically transcribing now as we speak. So we'll have a transcriptions and it'll differentiate between the things that I said and the things that Sophia said. So that's a really easy way to bring someone into the podcast, and you'll see that appear in a minute. There we go. So it's transcribed and it's going to play those in order. You'll see that there are now 2 people involved in the recording. Sophia, can you give me a brief rundown of your favourite podcast that you're listening to? Right, so
yeah, absolutely.
Correct transcript. We'll see if we can get your name right at least, Sophia. There we go. Correct transcript's actually working. I don't know why it just would not let me change Wynyard. It just wanted to make sure that Wynyard was involved. Maybe it's because the words were too different. I'm not really sure. So now we've got our transcription there, and I can run the filter on those to make sure that they're enhanced as well. So I can make sure that that conversation is enhanced. So we put our enhanced speech on. So that's one way to collaborate. I'm about to throw over to Brigid because the next thing that we want to do is to get your thoughts and to get you guys involved in the podcast itself.
Mark?
Yes.
Sorry, there's one more question.
Yeah.
Would you recommend recording in shorter stints for ease of editing, or all in one go, like in the real world?
I would. That's a really good question.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
I would record in short stints and sort of have and stop every couple of minutes if it was just me recording by myself. If I'm interviewing someone, though, I think you're much better off letting them go. And if they say something that they want edited, just get them to pause for 5 seconds so you can easily find where those issues are. That's a great question.
That's probably the biggest thing Mark and I have learned in doing lots of podcasts together, is that when one of us messes up, we pause. We do a deliberate pause. And because we're often looking at each other, we're like, okay, okay, we're going to cut this bit. Okay. And then we'll go, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then start talking again.
That's right.
Yeah.
We even have a colleague that, Anna, who makes podcasts, that has a blooper reel at the end of semester for her students. And she said that's her most listened to podcast of the entire semester, which I think it's a wonderful idea. But I'll throw to Brigid because I've been talking for a little while now. And am I sharing my PowerPoint? Have I got that right?
Looks
Wonderful.
good to me, Mark.
Over you, Bridge.
And I believe we only have 20 minutes left to finish here. So we're going to whip right through this one because you do have to put the Scottish accent on over one of those if you can, Mark. So I noticed in the chat somewhere there were some questions around best practice and are there guidelines for best practice for podcasting in teaching and learning environments? And that is a question that we've asked ourselves, and we're actually working on developing up a paper around that. And we're obviously using UDL to guide us in that process. But one of the ways that we're experimenting to make sure that we're achieving a really good quality teaching and learning experience is by integrating into the podcast for things that are a little more complex, learning experiences that are a little more complex than interviews or conversations, is integrating liberating structures into a podcast. So liberating structures really just being workshopping activities whereby we can incorporate the student voice into the podcast or more than one participant. And it's the idea that we have some structure, a workshopping structure, so that we can get outcomes, so that we know what the outcome of the activity is going to be, but enough freedom to liberate new ideas. And we're going to run with this little experiment here today, which is a workshopping activity around envisaging alternative futures. And this is a method that I'm really enjoying at the moment because it's a method that's intended to help us envisage alternative futures so we can achieve the level of transformation that we actually need to do in a fairly quick time. So this one's called Memories of the Future. I can provide a link for this one later. And it's called Time Travelers. And we're actually going to use this method to help us liberate new ideas and ways of doing things so that we can bring UDL into the classroom at an accelerated pace. Because if we can't see what it is that we're wanting to achieve, then we can't actually be it. So, Mark, the next slide. So, in this activity, we're going to ask you, each and every one of you, to imagine an alternative future. It's not utopia, okay? Nothing's perfect because we're human beings. But we're going to ask you to think about a real world where education environments are driving the transformations necessary to accessible futures, and where education is key to the success of all people and the communities that they live in. So say in 10 years' time from today, so we're going to jump in a time machine and we're going to arrive at a place where the most remarkable transformation in learning environments has occurred, and the people that helped us to get there, the organisations, the teachers, the institutions, the policies that helped us to achieve that have gone down in human history as the most remarkable people that enabled this. So we're going to ask you to close your eyes for 2 minutes. We're going to turn on the time machine and travel to that future. So if you feel that you'd like to, it's easiest to close your eyes. We're going to go quiet for 2 minutes while you imagine what that educational environment looks like, where UDL is at the centre of everything that we do. And we'll come back in 2 minutes. What does it look like and sound like, feel like and smell? Okay, that feels like 2 minutes.
Wonderful. So now we're going to try and get those thoughts into the podcast, Brigid. Thank you for that. So what I would like you all to do is go to another bit of software called Vocaroo, and I'll walk you through this. So I will post the link to Vocaroo in the chat. Now, this could obviously be recorded in any way. You could do it on your phone, or you could do it using other bits of software. But Vocaroo is just a ridiculously straightforward way to, and you could do this with a group of students to make for a more engaging online presentation too, by the way. So if I'll show you what you have to do, we're going to, I'll share my screen, get you to record for about a minute your thoughts. How is UDL, what does the world look like when UDL is central to everything that you do in your educational context? All you have to do is to click that record icon, and then you'll have an option to go to save and share. And I would like for some very brave people in the room, once you've done your recording, now make sure your microphone is on mute for when you do your recording, otherwise we'll hear you. I would love you, once you've gone to save and share, for some of you to post your recordings via the link that's provided in the chat. Makes a lot more sense when you actually do it, but you essentially hit record, hit save and share, record your thoughts for a minute, copy the link, paste it into the chat for us. And then I'll bring that into the podcast itself.
Sorry, can you repeat those instructions?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
No. So if you go to vocaroo.com, then hit the little red record button, and you'll automatically be recording. So just share your thoughts based on the questions that Brigid's just posed. So talk about how UDL, if it was implemented perfectly over the next, in 10 years' time, how would that reshape your educational context?
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And then hit save and share, copy the link, and post the link into the chat. We'll see who's going to be brave and post their first thoughts into the chat. Ah, Victoria, fantastic. So what I'm going to do, I'll just click on that and I'll download it at my end. So it'll be downloaded onto my computer. Thank you for being brave. Okay, WHGR. Okay, so now I've got that here on my computer. So I'll share my screen and show you how I get these into there. So I'll go to share.
And there's another one from Darren and Bridge. I believe we had you lined up to do one as well.
Wonderful, good. So now all I have to do here is to go to, and I'll make my screen a bit bigger so you can see all the different elements. So another way that I can bring audio in, pre-recorded audio, is to go to upload. Then in my download section, I know that this one's Victoria's because I just downloaded it. And I go to open, and you'll see that that now uploads, because essentially anything that's MP3, and I can press play here.
I don't know.
Thank you, Victoria. So you can see how easy that is. The other thing that I can do is to go to transcribe, so we can see exactly what Victoria shared with us, right? So this is a nice short and sharp one. So that's going to be, it's for the purposes of this exercise, that's going to be perfect. So I can bring the MP3 in, I can transcribe it. See, and that should have been. There we go. And the other thing that I can do, because Victoria's probably just recorded that straight into her laptop, is to go to these filters, and I can clean that up just by enhancing the speech.
I don't know.
And it creates a much clearer version of that, right? So look, I won't go back in and grab some of the others.
That's also a great example of Andy's question where it really lifted that level up.
Yes, it does. And it evens the levels out. Yeah. So for those of you who are familiar with audio editing tools, there's no more of this, because I can assure you that when Sophia and I used to record, my levels were here. Sophia's were always up here. That became a bit of a challenge for me to bring together. So the other thing, the Scottish accent, we've got 8 minutes left. I'm going to quickly, so that's just another way to be able to bring people in. One of the things that I saw when we asked you the question earlier, I don't like my voice, it's not a radio voice. This is a very common thing that we come up against. Now, I'm going to show you another tool now. This is called 11 Labs, and I will put a link here into the chat. There is a free version. The free version is relatively limited insofar as the quantity that you can do, but it does do everything that I'm about to show you, right? So there is a free version, but you're limited to the sheer quantity that you're allowed to do. But I'm going to show you how amazing this is. So what I can do, text to speech, which is a bit roboty. Here's a section of audio for my podcast, right? So I can generate that speech. No, it's not going to be used.
It's Dorothy.
Oh, it's because I'm on Dorothy, maybe. I'll do speech to speech. So instead of doing text to speech, I'm going to record some audio here. So this is just a quick example of how amazing 11 Labs is if I didn't like my voice and I wanted to sound more professional, or potentially even Scottish. All right, so now I've got my recording. Now I can choose, so if I play my recording back to you, have I shared my audio? Can you hear that? Yep, cool. So this is just a quick example of how amazing 11 Labs. So now I get to pick someone else's voice. Now I don't know which ones are Scottish. It's made it a bit hard. I'm just gonna go with Bill to show you, but one of these on here will be Scottish, right? So now when I do it, if I generate that using Bill, it picks up every inflection that I just used, but in a completely different person's voice.
So this is just a quick example of how amazing 11 Labs is if I didn't like my voice and I wanted to sound more professional or potentially even Scottish.
There we go. I did spend 6 months a long time ago in Inverness, and yes, I could not understand a thing that anyone said to me saying out for a whole 6 months, but it was always an adventure. But you'd be able to find the right voice here.
Our distrust is very expensive.
I was a bit racist, so I went for Patrick to see if that was a Scottish voice, but it wasn't. But there are big libraries here that we can find, right? So it's a really easy way to change your voice. I could change it to.
What worries you masters you?
I could change it to American. Let me do that for a second, right? So now I do the same thing, but as I said, it picks up all of those fantastic inflections, and this, we've been mucking around with.
So this is just a quick example of how amazing 11 Labs is if I didn't like my voice and I wanted to sound more professional.
Martin, that's a fantastic point. Do you lose connection? Potentially. Do you know how I would use this? And I'm already planning on doing this, by the way. Now, and all I have to do is now download that. And then I can, so if I go to download, I can drop and drag that into my podcast. And while I'm doing that, I'll explain it. What I'm thinking about doing when I want to share a reading with one of my groups for my students, so there'll be me talking, and then there might be a section of a reading that I wanted to share with them. I would do that in a different voice. I think there's a real value in doing that. I agree, losing authentic connection is a worry, but absolutely you can bring different voices into it. This is using the free version, absolutely, Greg. Yep, it's just limited in the quantity that you can do. So now I can upload 11 Labs into here. Where did I put that? Did I upload that correctly? Did I put it somewhere else? Hang on, I don't think I uploaded that.
It's correctly at the top, Mark.
At the top, okay, yeah. There it is, yeah. So the first thing I would need to do is to drag that down. So I use a little drag tool. The drag tool can be a bit glitchy. And I can put that halfway in a conversation as well. So I can literally plonk it right in the middle of that conversation and then go to transcribe. There we are. So we've got three. Can your content be used to train the AI, Dara? That is a fantastic question. Essentially, you can put it into the AI generator and create a voice. Unless you do that, as far as the software tells you, no, you can't. It's as private as putting your voice anywhere on the internet is. So I wouldn't vouch for that. But yeah, but certainly there is an option where you can create a replica of your own voice, which would be shareable. So yeah, sorry, noting time, and I have waffled on far more than I thought I would. And hopefully we've been
so much. Now I know we've got about 2 minutes left. You've done such a great job answering questions in the chat as we go. I've got one from Andrew previously, that Audacity is very screen reader friendly, and they'd be interested to see how or if Podcaster is screen reader accessible. I'm not sure whether you have any information on that.
Screen reader friendly in relation to using the software itself?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay. That is a good question, and to be honest, I haven't tried it yet. Based on my experiences with other Adobe products, I'd be very surprised if it wasn't very good. But the fact that it's in beta mode, there's a potential that it's, yeah, that's okay, Victoria. We'll put some, we'll put some stuff in the thing. But yeah, based on other Adobe products, it would be good. But potentially, if it's in beta, it might not be.
Thanks so much. We have another around, is it easy to provide the transcript to students? So if you wanted to put this into a learning mode, how would we get that podcast and the transcript to students?
Wonderful. Yep, I would go to download, and all I do is go download transcript, download final audio, and the transcript right there in about 5 seconds that you probably can't see on my screen. I'll have to share another screen. the transcript is there, and it differentiates between each of the speakers. And then you could copy and paste that and put it into a Word doc or whatever. Yep, great question. Yep.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I hope we didn't miss too many questions that just came in at that last moment. But on behalf of everyone here, thank you so much, Mark, Sophia, and Brigid, for a really interactive and engaging session. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.